Welcome back, AP. All right, so I'm going to start grading your test today, right? Need everybody to stay calm, remain calm, right? It's going to be okay. And big thing that I'm going to be posting this weekend as well is I'm going to be posting your project sheet of what y'all are going to be working on, right? And I'm going to be sending out some information on that just so y'all know what's up. But I don't see y'all again, I don't think, until Tuesday, right? Tuesday? I think so. Tuesday? Is it Tuesday? Yeah. So I don't believe I'll see y'all again until Tuesday. So you'll have time to read over that project sheet and bring anything you need into class and stuff like that. It's going to be like simple stuff, right? I know Marie Rowley's not a big art fan, right? So she ain't going to have to do all that. But I know like you're definitely going to need your Chromebook. You're going to need to be able to bring some creative ideas. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, right? It's going to be definitely worth a test grade. It's going to be a little bit of a brute, but you guys got this, okay? So, but let's get into it. All right, now, really fast. We left off in class. Oh, and before we get started, not the longest flip slide-wise, as you can see. Only have to get through, what is that, 8 slides? One of them's mostly a picture, right? So, a lot of content, though, okay? Make sure you're not writing down everything word for word, but at the same time, make sure you're writing down stuff, little ancillary notes or little extra annotations so you know exactly what we're talking about, right? Because this is the stuff that we clipped off the end of the Reformation unit, and we're now pushing forward, okay? So with that, though, let's go ahead and get into it. It's perfect, though, because this literally flows directly into the next unit. We're literally talking about the next unit in this unit, so it's really, really awesome that we're doing this, and it's just going to go, and it's going to move straight into the other one, all right? Now, going into it, though, we left off in class talking about why the French never separated from the Catholic Church, a lot of that being because of Francis I, you know, old Da Vinci air sucker, like doing that whole weird thing. The $60 million salt shaker guy started out as trying to raise revenue, selling public office to noble families and stuff like that. But, of course, that's going to fall flat on its face because he can't tax it after he sells it. But he then turns to the Pope, right? And he makes it so he can appoint Catholic Church officials, right? And it's like 500 of them. 500 royal bishops and cardinals that are going to be allowed to be elected by Francis I inside of France by him alone is going to create an agreement somewhat between Leo X and himself. Okay, Leo X being a Medici Pope, and then we got a Medici showing up in the royal family, right? A little bit of a weird situation going on here. So Catherine de' Medici will marry Henry II, the son of Francis I, right? And then as we know, Henry II finds a very, very sketchy death to a lance to the eyeball. He ends up dying because of his wounds. He doesn't die immediately on the in the jousting arena, but he does die from his wounds. And that actually makes it so our girl Catherine right here, the woman that Bloody Mary wishes she could have been like, would have actually taken the throne, right, as Queen Regent. And that's what you are when you're a ruler when your child's a little too young, right, the Queen Regency in France. Due to the fact that, jot this word down real fast, this all relates to a thing called Salic law, right? S-A-L-I-C. Salic law says that no woman in France was allowed to inherit the throne. This law also existed in England up until the Third Succession Act of 1543 when the royals, the Tudor girls were going to be allowed to take over. And Bloody Mary, first female monarch ever in European history. Gotta love it. All right, so now with that, though, she takes over. And she's helping her boy sons rule, right? Francis II is the very, very first one, and he actually is like kind of a sickly kid, right? And then he dies, and then it's Charles IX, and then he dies, and then it's Henry III, and then he dies, and like all this other stuff. But the big thing you need to know is that under her Queen Regency and under her rule, many French nobles are starting to convert to being Huguenots, right? They're changing to that Calvinist style of Protestantism that was originally underneath, Calvin, right? John Calvin, right? They're converting to being Huguenots, right? And we know that John Calvin, well, he's dead by this point, but we also know that he didn't even do most of his practices in France. He did them in Switzerland, and I finally figured out what it was called. It's called like the Affair of the Placards, right? The Affair of the Placards was this moment when all these posters started popping up all over France saying that, like, Francis is the devil and Francis is in cahoots with the church and the Catholic Church is terrible, and it's all these little posters popping up. One of them apparently popped up on Francis's door, right? And so Francis decides it's time to Bernie kill a bunch of people, right, and a bunch of Calvinists, and John Calvin leaves, and he starts the Geneva Calvinist community in Switzerland, leads to the Genevan Consistory, right, trying to make sure that our religion and our social laws are very, very linked, right? So many of y'all got that one right on the test. I was very, very impressed because of all the ordinances, right? No public drunkenness, da-da-da-da-da, and they would go up to magistrates and be like, you should kill these people, and they would just do it. Now, what ends up occurring, though, the Huguenots start to turn, and they actually start to shift, mostly for anti-monarchical reasons, right? And this leads to a lot of iconoclasms, okay? Because these nobles begin to then convince the people that live within their provinces to also convert to Catholicism, and then these nobles then tell them that the icons that exist within Catholic churches need to be chink, 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 destroyed. And so iconoclasms begin to break out all over, mostly southern France, right? And many Huguenots are going to be perpetrators of this. Many people are going to die, and these iconoclasts led to armed conflicts, right? Armed conflicts and large public executions of Huguenots by Catholic nobles, right? And Catholic nobles are going to be very angry about all this, okay? And this is going to be constituted as the first, second, and third wars of religion in France that all start over iconoclasms, right? That all start over property destruction and these nobles converting to being Huguenots. And so a large amount of like pain and suffering was caused by, you know, knocking the face of Mary off of a statue, which I find to be actually hilarious. I love Mary, don't get me wrong, but like, it's just funny. Like, you broke a piece of stone and then we're just going to kill each other? It's nuts. Now, these biggest results, though, of this is because of the first, second, and third wars of religion in France, underneath Catherine de' Medici's queen regent rule with her little boy sons that are doing basically nothing. The largest result is several French cities, big French cities, go completely Protestant, right, under the guidance of those nobles. And these ones are like La Rochelle, right? Oh, God, I want to go there so bad. Southern France is supposed to be beautiful. La Rochelle is a very good example of this. La Rochelle is going to be coming up a little bit later, so that's why I got some stars next to it. But Cognac and I'm going to call it Montauban, but I'm sure in French it's like Montauban. All right, so, but really quick though, Queen Regent for not one, not two, but three of her sons, all during these like wars of religion and during these iconoclastic craziness, right? So with that though, very, very important that we understand that Catherine de' Medici was in power during these first, second, and third wars of religion, right? Now, to stop the violence, she's got to figure out something because these things are almost collapsing the French economy, and it's also making them open to a possible invasion, right? It's making them open to an invasion by the Habsburgs, right? So remember, Valois and Habsburgs hate each other. And somebody right now, like Lauren Gross or Gia, is probably like, you said she's a Medici. But yes, but she married a Valois. So by defect, she's a Valois, right? So with all this violence, they have to figure out a way to try and stop it, right? So to help stop the violence, they decide to set a royal wedding, right? Because what's occurring right now is a very large issue, all right? So Charles IX, right, is in power during this time period. It's not Henry III yet. And Charles IX, of course, is ruling along with his mommy because he's a big baby. And he actually can't figure out what else to do other than maybe to try and find a way to link the two like units together. To what they decide to do is they're going to start passing some laws, right? A couple of edicts that are going to lead to Catherine de' Medici advocating for religious tolerance, right? They're going to say, oh, well, how about we'll give the Protestants some more rights, right? We'll make it so they can own certain like swaths of land. Or we'll do this, or we'll do that to stop all this religious violence, right? And they're going to allow, the big one is they allow a Protestant advisor into her son's court, right? Charles IX brings on a guy by the name of Coligny, right? Like C-O-L-I-G-N-Y. And they allow him to show up and advise the king. This makes the Catholics furious. All right, so jot this down. The Catholics get so enraged by the idea that a Protestant is now advising their king, that this idea that a Catholic woman is going to be marrying a Protestant noble. They're so mad that they start this thing called the Catholic League, right? The Catholic League would originally be started by several bishops that were, ironically enough, a part of the entire French royal appointing, and also the Guise family. Other really, really fervent nobles that are still very Catholic are like, look, these royals are not doing right by us, right? They're appointing Protestant, like leaders within the courts. We can't allow this, right? So they start the Catholic League. And the Catholic League starts assembling armies just in case anything ever goes down, right? But the royal wedding still goes through, right? And the way that this is going to occur is it's going to be Margaret of Valois. This is the daughter of Catherine de' Medici and Henry II. And they're going to marry her to this goofy-looking dude who, ironically enough, does earn the title of the Great later on. It's something about the creepy smile. He just looks like he owns a van and he's going to offer you candy, right? But his name is Henry of Navarre, right? And Navarre is a little region of France down on the border of France and Spain, right? Very, very small area. And they referred to him as the King of Navarre, right? Because he is a Protestant. He is a Huguenot, right? Very important that we know that Henry is a Huguenot, right? Henry's a Huguenot, Margaret is a devout Catholic. And the idea is that hopefully this marriage will help stem some of these wars of religion that are really costing a lot of money, life, and economical woes in France, right? And so what ends up occurring, though, is the Huguenots feel like they're getting a massive victory, right? The Huguenots and all of these Huguenot nobles, including Coligny himself, the guy who is the advisor to the new king, Charles IX, they're all showing up in Paris to see this bad boy. They're like, not only can we hold office, but also we're getting more rights. We win. Nah. But ironically enough, the only reason this stuff happened is because nobody could win the wars of religion. The Huguenots and the Catholics were so split 50-50, they kept resulting in stalemates, right? Literally, it would be like, oh, a little Protestant victory here, or a little Catholic victory here. And they would try to storm cities like La Rochelle, but they were so well defended, you just couldn't break through. So they had all these stalemates and needless death, right? But the Catholics, so basically no one won the early wars of religion. It was just a stalemate, right? So hundreds of Huguenot nobles, though, feel like they're winning because one of their own is getting married into the royal lineage, right? So hundreds, 300 royal families and Huguenot nobles show up to this wedding, and they're very excited about it. And the wedding goes down, right? The wedding occurs, and then 3 days after the wedding, this happens. And this is what I meant, Catherine de' Medici, cold-hearted, and then perpetrates what is known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, right? So what ends up occurring is Coligny, that advisor, is walking around the streets of Paris after the wedding, and someone tries to assassinate him, right? They try to shoot him out of a window. Yay, guns, they're a thing now. All right, so like they just showed up like 5 minutes ago in European history, but they try to shoot him, and they miss, and he survives, right? And what everyone's afraid of is some Huguenot reprisal, right? Huguenots freaking out and then maybe doing some violence as well. And so what Catherine orders 3 days after the wedding, she demands the gates of Paris be slammed shut in fear of reprisal. And then Catholic military and Catholic League members of the military spill into the streets of Paris and then begin to drag Huguenot nobles and their families into the streets and murder them in mass, right? They just orchestrated the assassination of all those nobles that showed up to see the wedding. And then it then continues further, and then the Catholic League starts assassinating members of Huguenot villages and killing those people. And some historians believe that anywhere from 10,000 to 70,000 people were executed due to the massacres started at St. Bartholomew's Day, right? The St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. And it's such a bad event. And I'm going to show you what I mean. Like, remember, Bloody Mary only had like few hundred Protestants executed. Catherine de' Medici saw the execution of a possible 70,000, right? So Catherine de' Medici, St. Bartholomew Day Massacre. Also, Marie Rowley, this St. Bartholomew's Day is that picture that you had in your AP book and your workbook, and then also you're going to see, y'all are going to be getting some AP workbooks soon, which is going to be really cool. And, oh, come on, where is Catherine? Where you at, Catherine? Come on, where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Not it. Oh, there she is. That is Catherine de' Medici presiding over a group of dead Protestants. And then there's her little pansy boy son back here, Charles IX, right? Who's like, and he's looking away from it. what a baby. And then she's just staring them down, dressed in black. Look at Catherine looking like, just looking at, like just looking at all these dead bodies of these people. And then this is the Catholic League troops. Like, what do you want us to do next? And then they just go kill a possible 70,000 people. It's absolutely wild. Coligny, the advisor, he ends up dead in this as well. They rip him out of his hotel, or they kill him almost in his hotel room, throw him out of a window, drag him through the streets of Paris, and then huck him in a river, right? Like, so, like, it's absolutely wild what ends up occurring. And what ends up breaking out, though, is now, of course, you're going to see more religious violence, and you're going to see a Protestant Union versus a Catholic League, right? The Protestants didn't get executed completely. It wasn't a full-blown genocide, but religious wars are then going to rage on for 15 years in France, right? The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th wars of religion almost completely collapsing France. Philip II tries to invade at one point. And during this time, too, Charles IX dies childless, and so it goes to Henry III. And then everyone's freaking out because Henry III can't seem to have any kids, and, like, he can't have any children. And they were like, well, what if we give it to my cousin Francis or my brother? He's over in Polish Lithuania. But then that guy dies, right? So Henry of Navarre, right? Henry of Navarre, Henry of Navarre. In 1581, right? In 1581, jot that year down. In 1581, since the Valois families die with no children ready to take the throne, Henry of Navarre becomes Henry IV of France, right? That's right, a Protestant has just assumed control of France during their wars of religion, right? But to get it to stop, because he's tired of it, right? Because he is more for his people. He's a former Protestant noble. He believes in the little guy. He believes in the minority of France. And he's like, to make all of this violence stop, he issues what is called the Edict of Nantes, right? And this is a big reason why he's referred to as Henry the Great, right? So Henry IV issues the Edict of Nantes. And the Edict of Nantes gave full-blown freedom from persecution to Huguenots and other Protestants, right? Catherine, like we said, did some nice things. She said that they could worship, just not in cities. They had to go, like, be outside in the countryside and all this other stuff. Weird. But anyway, what ends up occurring, though, is the Edict of Nantes gives full freedom from persecution to all Protestants, right? Really big deal. This chaos, though, paved the way for the absolutism, which is going to be our next unit, right? And that saw the rise of the Bourbon family, because Henry VIII, right here, is the very first Bourbon monarch of France, right? He literally creates the Bourbon dynasty, right? And the Bourbon dynasty founded your state. His grandson is Louis XIV, the guy who Louisiana is named after. You're welcome. What's up? And this is apparently him dressed as Hercules defeating the Hydra, and the Hydra is supposed to be the Catholic League, right? Like, that's the Catholic League, and this is him stomping on it and killing it, right? So, very, very important in a nutshell. But now we got to keep going, all right? Give me 1 second, though. Let me check my time. Sorry about that, guys. Just wanted to check my time real quick, make sure I wasn't killing your entire weekend, right? But anyway, now we're moving over to someplace else. We're moving over to the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands is going to be a very important player in a lot of history to come when it comes to Europe, right? It's actually still a pretty important player even now, right? Really quick, though, also, too, which you can refer to these people as, which a lot of times you'll hear me solve in this, is the Low Countries, right? The Low Countries is what you would call Belgium and the Netherlands now, right? So the Netherlands originally, though, the Dutch, right? Hingedurgendurgen, even though that would actually be the Danish because Happy Leif Erikson Day. Now, really quick, though, apparently the Netherlands started out under the reign of Charles V, right? And we know Charles V, this good old Habsburg prince himself, is going to be the Holy Roman Emperor right at the age of 19. The 7 electors bribe everything. He inherits the throne, and when he inherits the throne, due to the fact that he is the grandson of Isabella and Ferdinand, and also because he is elected Holy Roman Emperor, he inherits the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is a part of the Holy Roman Empire, which according to Voltaire, later on in the unit we'll talk about, was neither holy, nor Roman, nor Empire. Now, he inherits the Netherlands and Belgium when he's crowned the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, it's not called Belgium yet, though, just so you know. It's still literally all part of, like, really all still considered the Netherlands, or the Low Countries, right? Now, the Netherlands, actually, ironically enough, within the Holy Roman Empire, underneath Charles V, functions as their own autonomous unit. Now, they have to collect taxes and give a stipend of those taxes to Charles V, but they are allowed to govern their own people, right? So they got a decent little setup. So, like, and they have these little things that exist inside the Netherlands that are called staats, right? S-T-A-D-E-T. And the guy who actually runs the staats is called the stadtholder, right? Usually referred to as the Prince of Orange, right? The Prince of Orange is the title given to the stadtholder. Now, really quick, though, Charles V just said, pay your taxes, pay homage to me as a member of the Holy Roman and / Spanish Empire, and we'll all be fine. But remember, Charles V had the worst reign by the best ruler, right? Charles V was not that bad of a ruler. He's just trying too much to respond to people, and he's just got too much going on. He can't control the fact that the encomienda, well, he could have. The encomienda is killing natives en masse in Latin America, so he has to start the slave trade. He then, well, maybe he's not a good ruler. He started the slave trade. Well, he didn't. The Portuguese did, but he married a Portuguese princess, so he's awful. Yeah, let's just go back on that. He's terrible. Now, anyway, so everything that he could have tried to do right, though, went completely wrong, right? Because that's going to lead him to abdicating, right? He had the Schmalkaldic Wars against the princes. He had the Habsburg-Valois Wars against the Valois of France, right? He had all the Italian wars. He had wars popping up left and right, and then he goes to the Peace of Augsburg, and he allows the Lutherans to be acknowledged, but he never acknowledged the Calvinists. Now, big thing to understand, right? He then, though, freaks out, and as we know, he splits his family in half into an Austrian branch and a Spanish branch. Now, the person that's going to get the Spanish branch is his son, Philip II, who's a really, really big, I want to be like my daddy boy, and he wants to do more, right? So he goes off, as we know, and marries Mary Tudor so he can take over England. He wants to expand his empire. He does not like France at all. He doesn't like the way they're handling their wars of religion. At one point, he tries to invade France, which is very, very important that we understand. But he takes over the Spanish branch, right? And he also is goofy looking too. I know we talked a lot of work about Mary Tudor, but man, he's still also got the like you can just tell how much of a Habsburg that guy is, right? So don't jot this down yet. Don't write this down yet. I forgot to animate it. Just don't write it down yet, all right? But what's going to occur is in the Netherlands, the Protestant work ethic and the concepts of Calvinism are going to take hold in the Netherlands, right? So in the area that you would consider Dutch in the Low Countries, the northern provinces of the Low Countries are going to begin to go Calvinist, right? And they begin to adopt the concepts of the Protestant work ethic. And they become very, very big fans of Calvinism because of its anti-monarchical ideas, its ideas that you can work hard and gain your own wealth, and its ideas that you can kind of become an autonomous individual in this massive Catholic world, right? And so this is a very, very famous painting of Dutch Calvinists, and it's actually on, I can never remember what it's called. It's not a Rembrandt, but this is just an example. As you can see, the Dutch are beginning to convert to Calvinism very, very rapidly, right? So you can see this by their outfit, their very simple outfits, and the fact that they're sitting there working and studying as a unit, right? Now, Philip, though, is going to respond to this mass conversion by upping taxes on the Dutch. He says because of their religion, but he's a liar. It's because he's broke, right? So he has no money anymore, right? Literally, under Philip II, Spain declares bankruptcy. They have a country says, I don't know, what? Like, it has no money, right? So, and this is all caused because of Spanish inflation, right? Also, really quick, write another one down underneath this as well. Also because the expulsion of the Muslims and the Jews, right? So everything's kind of coming full circle at this point. Because Isabella and Ferdinand led the Spanish Inquisition and the Reconquista against the Muslims and the Jews, you now just exiled and or killed a huge population of people inside of your country that were craft workers, artisans, and money lenders, and you just ran them all out of Dodge. So now all the people that were big in the economy, made things and sold them of high quality, and then also lent money out to other businesses, don't live there anymore, so that took a huge part of their economy away. And then also, but it was okay because the Habsburgs were like, well, we got all this money coming in from the colonies, but then they brought in too much bullion, too much gold and silver, and what ended up happening is the Spanish economy completely collapsed, right? So he decides like, oh, well, I'll just up taxes on the Dutch a lot, right? And so what ends up happening is riots ensue because they don't want to pay these taxes because Charles V said that like that is not going to be a thing. You're just going to be an autonomous unit, and Philip is trying to rule over them much more like an aggressive king, right? Riots ensue, and Catholic churches, of course, iconoclasm, because that's what Calvinists do. They break things, right? Iconoclasms ensue, and what's going to happen is Philip is going to send 20,000 troops to the Netherlands to stop these riots, and he creates a council under, I believe it's the Duke of Parma. He actually creates a council known as the Council of Troubles. Now, the Dutch don't call it the Council of Troubles, though. The Dutch call it the Council of Blood, right? So, because this council put on trial thousands of people, and many of them got put to death because of these iconoclasms and because of their conversion to Calvinism, right? So the Council of Troubles was really the Council of Blood because they were there literally seeking to try and execute Calvinists who were actually bucking back against Spanish rule and refusing to pay those taxes, right? Now, due to this movement of troops by Philip, this then begins what is known as the 80 Years' War for Dutch independence, right? And it lasts from 1568 to 1648, right? And it's a very, very back and forth. There's a peace for 12 years at one point. There's several stalemates. It's crazy, all right? Now, with that, though, I could talk about this in a ridiculous amount of depth. I could, but I'm not going to. Because you don't need to know the Duke of Parma and how the Prince of Orange, what he does, and all this other stuff. We can give you the snippets, right? So the Union of, not Utrecht, it's Utrecht, actually, U-T-R-E-C-H-A, there is no L. But what ends up happening, though, is during this 80 Years' War, in 1579, the Union of Utrecht is established. And that is the northern provinces of the Netherlands. The modern-day Netherlands is established, right? And they declare their independence in 1581, right? And this union says Calvinism will be allowed and is encouraged, right? We will be autonomous and away from the Spanish Empire. They declare their independence in 1581. Now, the fighting doesn't stop until 1648, but they're supported by the English, right? Now, the war continues to go on even after they declare their independence at the Union of Utrecht, right? And then the Netherlands is like, we are no longer a part of this Holy Roman Empire. We are now our own thing. But the war continues, but the Dutch emerge victorious for a lot of different reasons, right? The main reasons being the VOC, the East India Company. Remember the East India Companies we talked about? Like, way back, that was this unit. Holy crap. Right, so, like, how did I forget about them? Definitely go back when you get a chance and study that stuff. We're going to talk about it and review it a little bit heavy as well in class on Monday. But the big thing is that the East India Company and the spice trade, right? Remember we talked about that at the beginning of this unit, right? That the Dutch were originally over in the Java Islands and the Spice Islands and stuff, and then they went over into India as well, and they became a massive part of the spice trade when they started this private company called the East India Company that I remember Emma Dewey was really worried about on the test and stuff like that. She was like, I don't get these things. Well, the big thing is, though, is Emma Dewey understands it 100% now as being a sovereign trade organization, right? The East India Company was allowed to declare war on people over in India if they needed to. They were allowed to move goods however they felt, and this is going to bring massive amounts of money into the Netherlands, right? While Spain is sitting there continually de-inflating their entire economy because they're not bringing the right stuff in. The spice trade is the most lucrative spice trade, or the most lucrative trade market in the world during this time, and the Dutch are big parts of it, right? They own like 30% of the spice trade in Europe. That's going to be a big reason why they win. Also because of pirates, privateers, and sea beggars. Because literally, learning from the English, they employ a lot of privateers known as sea beggars in the Netherlands to actually run their goods, move through blockades, and actually they employ them to help them win their war. And they also had massive amounts of support from Elizabeth I, right? Elizabeth I does help them out and supports them, and that, of course, leads to the Spanish Armada, and then Spain has no money. And in 1588, that's kind of the siren song of the of the Spanish Empire, right? Spain is then never relevant as a major power within Europe ever again, following the Dutch revolt and following the Spanish Armada. They just never quite get back to where they were, right? And if you look down here, this right here is going to be post-Union of Utrecht, right? These are the United Provinces up here, and they end up bringing in Antwerp and stuff like that, but this area down here ends up turning into what you now call Belgium, right? So now this area, though, ends up turning into the Low Countries and or the Netherlands following 1581, right? Now, this massive victory, though, the most important part about it is that the Dutch are going to emerge from this long war as an economic powerhouse in Europe, right? So, and in Europe, they are going to not declare themselves, though, as a monarchy. They break away from this concept. They have a constitution, and they establish themselves as a republic. So they are one of the only people that stay separate from this absolutist trend that ends up taking over all of Europe, them and England, right? So in Venice, if you want to really get serious about it. Now, this is going to lead to the Dutch Golden Age, right? And we're going to talk about the Dutch Golden Age in the next, like in the next couple of days, but we got to finish up this one other thing really, really fast, okay? We got to talk about witches, right? We got to talk about witches, all right? So now, a lot of this, you don't need to jot tons of this down, but it is important to know. It's a big part of the AP curriculum, and they do want you to know about it. But the Great European Witch Hunt is a very big thing, and it's related heavily to the Reformation. Now, this is the last bit of Reformation stuff before we get into the absolutism unit that's coming up next week, all right? So, all pre-modern European societies believe in witchcraft. Just a heads up, before we even go into this, it's not like the Reformation caused this idea of witchcraft. No. Witchcraft concepts have existed since the Middle Ages, since before that, even with the Romans, and every single society on the world has shamans or witch doctors or medicine men or whatever, right? So, like in India, they had like this belief in like witchcraft. Everybody believes that there is this weird ability to cast magic and do stuff on a temporal plane, right? Now, the Reformation, though, is going to lead to a dramatic uptick in trials of execution of women viewed as witches. Now, this is going to happen mostly in Protestant communities. Yay, yay. Sorry. All right, so now, because what's going to end up occurring is this adoption of the view of women as these terrible, nasty, disgusting figures of witches, right? Now, they end up turning on them due to several different reasons. And one of them is because rumors begin to swirl around communities, right? As, oh, they're flying through the air and stealing your babies at night. And I'll talk about the babies connection here in a few seconds, right? But another big reason why is because a book becomes very popular, and the printing press is a big reason why the accusation of witchcraft continues to just go full force, right? Now, this book by Heinrich Kramer, which is actually, he's a German man, he writes a book called The Hammer of the Witches, or The Witch's Hammer, right? Malleus Malefica, right? So, and the big thing about it is it's kind of a guidebook on hunting witches, right? It's like a How Do You Find a Witch for Dummies manual. And it becomes one of the most wide-read books throughout Europe. It was second place only to the Bible, right? Like, literally, that was the second best-selling book for over 70 years in Europe, second only to the Bible, right? So that's another big thing. This diffusion of the concept of hunting witches became very, very popular because of the printing press and because of literature being available for people to read about it, right? And after the religious wars, over 100,000 to 200,000 people are going to be tried for witchcraft, and over 40,000, we believe, were executed for it, right? So we'll get to that here in about 2 seconds, but 75 to 85% of the people that were executed because of these things were women, right? Now, and this is, of course, again, like a reinforcement of the concept that women were a subjugated people in Europe during this time period. People could have argued that Isabella d'Este, Christine de Pizan, and many other historical figures that were women were witches by just accusing them of being such, right? Or, look at another one. In 1431, the most famous woman of all time gets accused of being a witch and of being a heretic, and she's burned at the stake. And for any of you right now that are like, wait, is that Joan of Arc? Yes, you're right. Kimberly, Molly, Carson, Cassidy. You're all right. It was Joan of Arc, right? So witchcraft and these concepts have existed for a long time, long before the Reformation ever really occurred. And they were considered demonic lovers and misogyn, like da-da-da-da-da, right? So the big thing about this as well is you have to understand that in Protestant communities, and even in some Catholic communities, this wasn't nearly as prevalent in Catholic communities, it's much bigger in Protestant communities. Like, for example, the Salem witch trials. The Puritans are major accusers of witches. You have to understand that this has to do with interpretation of the Bible as well. There's like one psalm in the Bible that says, "Thou shalt not suffer the living of a witch," right? So due to that interpretation of the Bible, that's written in it. And so, of course, how do Protestant communities feel about anything written in the Bible? That is truth, right? Because it's Scripture. So it's kind of a big backfire of the Protestant movement, right? And also, in the Bible, there's heavy symbolism about the direct involvement of evil and of Satan and of sin in everyday life, right? And also in the Bible, values of women are considered demonic and damnable. They are considered very easily led to sin and kind of the harbingers of sin, going all the way back to the story of Adam and Eve. So Protestant communities end up subjugating women further because of translations of biblical texts. Like, this is a big backfire of the Protestant Reformation, right? And trials usually started with just an accusation, right? Just a very simple accusation of being like, oh, she killed my baby, or she put a spell on my husband and now he's impotent, and like da-da-da-da-da, right? So big accusations were often of lay-in nurses, because lay-in nurses were nurses that lived in your home while a woman was going through the postpartum period, while she was healing from childbirth, and would take care of the baby, right? Because women after childbirth and babies were so vulnerable, people were like, oh, if a baby died under one of their watches, witch, right? If a woman died, witch, right? Healers was a big one. If a person died under the guidance of a healer, right? So oftentimes women, witch, right? So widows were considered witches, usually because they lived so far away from society, witch, right? And a lot of these women were much older, right? And these trials would usually result of torture and inspection, right? So the big way they figured this out or whatever, the first thing they would do is they would bring you in front of the local hangman, right? And the hangman would have the woman shaved and stripped naked, and they would literally look for moles or warts or skin tags or scars or whatever, which ironically enough are just things that you get as you get older, right? And that's a big reason why many older women were accused of witchcraft, right? And then they would torture the women until they confessed, right? And oftentimes this would lead to their execution. Now, I just said this earlier because this is the range, but we now believe in the historical community that 40,000 to 50,000 people were executed for witchcraft, mostly in Germany, and this wouldn't stop until 1700, right? This is absolutely ridiculous, but it is a big backfire of the Protestant Reformation. But that's it. That's your flip for the weekend. I'll see you guys later. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I think this one's really interesting, but it's a lot of really important concepts, but I'll talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.